Welcome to the TELPAS Alternate Accessibility Training Module. This presentation will cover important information about accessibility features of this assessment. This presentation is for test administrators and assessment staff who either provide training for or administer TELPAS Alternate. It can be used by other educators as needed to clarify how emergent bilingual (EB) students with the most significant cognitive disabilities can access all four language domains of TELPAS Alternate. This presentation describes how TELPAS Alternate was designed to be inclusive of a variety of communication modes in English when assessing students with the most significant cognitive disabilities, and explains the accessibility policy for TELPAS Alternate for the domains of listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Students who are eligible to be administered TELPAS Alternate are EB students in grades 2 through 12 who have the most significant cognitive disabilities, and who are in the process of acquiring English proficiency in listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Even EB students whose parents have declined bilingual or English as a second language program services are required to be assessed, either with TELPAS or TELPAS Alternate. As previously mentioned, EB students in grades 2 to 12 with the most significant cognitive disabilities are eligible for TELPAS Alternate. The Texas Education Agency defines a student with the most significant cognitive disability as a student who exhibits significant intellectual and adaptive behavior deficits in their ability to plan, comprehend, and reason, and who also indicates adaptive behavior deficits that limit his or her ability to apply social and practical skills such as personal care, social problem-solving skills, dressing, eating, and using money across all life domains. The student also requires extensive, direct, individualized instruction and needs substantial supports that are neither temporary nor specific to a particular content area. The definitions of the four language domains as used on TELPAS have been revised to allow for alternate forms of communication on TELPAS Alternate. Take a moment to read these definitions and note the differences between assessments. Test administrators will consider student performance, described in the observable behaviors during regular classroom instruction, and while eligible students are completing instructional activities. Students will have access to the instructional accommodations indicated in their individualized education program. Teacher determination of English proficiency will reflect student performance in English using the same accommodations used in daily instruction. Some EB students may use sign language, Braille, or another method of communication instead of traditional English in one or more domains. Test administrators should allow students to use one or more alternate response modes, listed on the following slides, if the students regularly use the response mode, or modes, during instruction, and in accordance with the IEP. Alternate response modes are only intended for students who cannot listen, speak, read, or write in a traditional way. They are intended to address the communication needs of students based on their disability. Here is a list of alternate response modes for listening. Take a moment to read this list. Here is an example of how students in one class might use alternate response modes for listening. At the beginning of a unit on personal finance, students watch a short video explaining how people make deposits to their bank accounts. After the video, Mr. Forsh asks the students to tell what happened in the video. One student gazes at a picture of a customer walking into a bank. Two students draw a picture showing what happened at the beginning and end of the video. One student picks up two picture cards in order to show what happened first and next in the video. Here is a list of alternate response modes for speaking. Take a moment to read this list. This is an example of how students in one class might use alternate response modes for speaking. A science teacher is conducting a lesson about planets. Mrs. Dean reviews important vocabulary using picture word cards. She asks students to tell two things that describe planets. One student responds by using sign language. Two students respond using communication devices. Two students verbalize their response in English. Here is a list of alternate response modes for reading. Take a moment to read this list. This is an example of how students in one class might use alternate response modes for reading. Students in Mr. J's class are reading an adapted story about a girl who wants to grow up to be a soccer player. One student with a visual impairment is reading his story with texture-supported text. When everyone is finished reading, the teacher asks the class to determine the problem in the story. One student responds by verbally identifying the problem. Two students use word picture cards to identify the problem. Another student points to pictures in the story she was reading to identify the problem. One student gazes at a picture card of the problem. Here is a list of alternate response modes for writing. Take a moment to read this list. This is an example of how students in one class might use alternate response modes for writing. Ms. McDermott is teaching her students to write more descriptively. She models writing a description of an object, and the class creates a word bank of descriptive language they can use in their writing. Then the teacher asks the students to describe a new object. Two students use a keyboard to type a description at the computer. One student writes in a notebook with a pencil. One student chooses some word picture cards to describe the object. One student points to the best of two examples in a description. For purposes of TELPAS alternate, augmentative and alternative communication is a means other than traditional spoken or written communication by which a student can share a message with others. Some examples are gestures, facial expressions, picture cards, picture boards, sign language, speech-generating devices, switch-based output devices, and real objects. This is not an exhaustive list. Prompting is an action intended to initiate or continue a task that the student is being requested to complete. A prompt pulls the student through each step to the end of the task. Leading is asking the student to respond in a specific way or with a specific answer. Leading is not allowed. Prompting is allowed for rating the observable behaviors on the TELPAS alternate assessment. The purpose of TELPAS alternate is to accurately measure a student's ability to understand and use English to engage in social and academic learning environments. Prompting a student to respond to a task so that his or her ability to understand or use English can be accurately measured is acceptable. Here are some examples of prompting that would be allowed on TELPAS alternate. Questions such as "What do you think comes next?" Reminders such as "Keep on working until you have finished." Indicating, such as pointing to an object when a student loses eye contact to bring him or her back on task. Or pointing to a place in the text when the student becomes distracted to continue focus on the task. Proximity control, such as touching a student's arm to remind him or her to activate a switch. Or touching a student's shoulder to continue eye contact with the teacher or object to be viewed. Here are some examples of leading that are not allowed on TELPAS alternate. The teacher or student uses the student's native language. Exact directions, such as look at each word in the sentence. Find the name of the person. Mark the first letter in each name. Replace the letter with a capital letter. Due to limitations in mobility, some students may need assistance with physical access to a task as part of the supports. In these instances, the physical assistance can only help the student access the stimuli. The assistance cannot result in the teacher performing the task, as in the examples that follow. The teacher provides a hand-to-hand manipulation of the student to actually control motor movements, thus performing the task for the student. Placing the student's hand on a pre-programmed switch. Pointing to the character in the story before the student can identify the character in the story. There are a total of 8 PowerPoints to help educators learn about TELPAS Alternet. This has been the training on TELPAS Alternet. The other PowerPoints are listed here for your reference. If you have any questions about the information in this PowerPoint, please contact the Student Assessment Division of the Texas Education Agency using the phone number or help desk email shown here. If you have questions about administration logistics or test materials, please contact Texas Testing Support. These slides were prepared by the Texas Education Agency Student Assessment Division. You are encouraged to use them as is for local training. If you change any of the slides for local use, please hide or remove Texas Education Agency logos, headers, or footers by editing the master slide. You must also remove the photographs. Only the Texas Education Agency has parental permission to use them for training purposes. This training is not intended to replace any materials or additional information on the Texas Education Agency website.